Number 10 takes us deep into the Song dynasty of ancient China, roughly 1,000 years ago, when the most intoxicating symbol of feminine beauty and refinement was a foot no longer than 3 Chinese inches, about the length of a credit card. They called these tiny, broken feet golden lotuses. A 3-inch foot was gold status, 4 inches was silver, and anything larger was mocked as an iron lotus, fit only for servants. The process began when a girl was between 4 and 7 years old, because after that the bones were considered too hard to reshape properly. First the feet were soaked for hours in a steaming hot bath of herbs, animal blood, and sometimes urine to soften the skin and bones. Then the 4 smaller toes were folded completely under the sole until they touched the heel, and the arch was snapped upward like a bow. Long silk bandages, soaked in the same mixture, were wrapped tighter and tighter every few days, pulling the big toe and heel closer together while crushing everything in between. The girl screamed for weeks. Pus and blood soaked through the bandages, the smell was unbearable, and infections often set in. Many lost toes to gangrene. Mothers ignored the cries, telling their daughters that pain now meant marriage later, because no respectable man would marry a woman with natural-sized feet. The swaying, mincing gait the bindings created was considered the sexiest walk imaginable. Poets wrote endless verses comparing it to a willow in the wind. Men fetishized the shoes, tiny embroidered silk slippers shaped like lotus buds, and some collected them the way others collect art. Wealthy men held lotus appreciation parties where women removed their shoes so the men could caress the deformed feet and even drink wine poured into the hollow of the arch. The practice lasted from the 10th century all the way to 1912, over 1,000 years of deliberate, generational crippling. Even after the Republic of China banned it, many older women refused to unbind because they felt grotesque with normal feet, and some secretly kept binding in private until they died. 1,000 years of agony, all because society decided that the ultimate female beauty was the permanent inability to walk or run. Number 9 transports us to Renaissance Europe, especially Venice and Elizabethan England, where the perfect female face was ghostly white, completely hairless above the eyebrows, and topped with a forehead so high it looked almost egg-shaped. To achieve this, women didn't just pluck a few stray hair or two. They sat for hours with tweezers, pumice stones, depilatory creams made from quicklime and arsenic, and bandages soaked in walnut oil and vinegar, ripping out every hair from the temples upward, sometimes removing 3 full inches of hairline permanently. Painful, bloody, and slow, but the result was a smooth, bulbous forehead that screamed, "I never have to lift a finger outdoors." Then came the makeup ceruse, a thick paste of white lead dissolved in vinegar. They painted it on in layers so heavy that it cracked when they smiled, giving Elizabeth I her famous mask-like appearance. The lead seeped into the skin, turning it grayish over time, eating away hair follicles, rotting teeth, and causing madness and early death. Doctors wrote pamphlets begging women to stop, but fashion only doubled down. Pale was power. Visible blue veins under translucent skin were erotic. Some women applied leeches to drain blood and make themselves even whiter. Others used drops of deadly nightshade in their eyes to dilate the pupils, creating that wide-eyed, slightly drugged look we now call dew-eyed. The combination of lead poisoning and belladonna gave them tremors, hallucinations, and eventually killed them, but dying in their 30s with perfect porcelain skin and bald foreheads. Beauty literally meant slow suicide. Number 8 brings us to Heian period Japan, roughly 800 to 1200 AD, when the aristocratic ideal of beauty demanded completely black teeth. They called the practice ohagro. Once a girl got married or came of age, she began dyeing her teeth every single day with a full, smelling lacquer made by dissolving iron filings in sake or tea and adding powdered gal nuts and tannins. The mixture oxidized into a glossy black coat that bonded permanently to enamel. White teeth were considered barbaric, something only peasants and animals had. Black teeth meant refinement, sexual maturity, and loyalty to one's husband, because the dye was so permanent that a woman who stopped applying it looked like she was mourning or unfaithful. The process was disgusting. The liquid tasted like rusty nails and stained everything black. Lips, gums, tongue, even the inside of the mouth turned dark. Women carried little kits with them to touch up after meals. If a tooth chipped, they filed it down to keep the smile symmetrical. Samurai sometimes blackened their teeth before battle to look more terrifying. Empresses and court ladies spent hours in front of mirrors making sure every tooth gleamed like lacquerware. The fashion lasted over 1,000 years, only disappearing in the late 1800s when Japan modernized and suddenly white teeth became the new status symbol. Imagine an entire elite class willingly turning their smiles into black voids because natural teeth were suddenly low class. Number 7 is the brass neck coils of the Kayan, often called patog women in Myanmar and northern Thailand. Starting at age 5, a girl has a heavy brass coil wrapped around her neck. Every few years more coils are added, sometimes up to 30 rings weighing 25 pounds or more. The coils don't actually stretch the neck, they push the collarbones and ribs downward, permanently deforming the upper torso so the neck appears unnaturally long, up to 10 or 12 inches of visible brass. The weight is so extreme that the shoulders slope dramatically and the clavicles are crushed downward. If the coils are ever removed after decades, the neck muscles have atrophied so badly that the head can literally fall forward and the person can suffocate. Women sleep, eat, bathe, and work with the coils on. They can't turn their heads normally and must drink soup through a straw. Yet within the culture, the longer the neck, the more beautiful, fertile, and high status the woman. Brides with the longest necks command the highest bride prices. Some origin myths say the coils protected from tiger bites, others that they made women unattractive to rival tribes who raided for wives. But today, most women say they wear them because it's simply the definition of beauty. When tourism started, photographers paid huge sums for pictures, and many women began adding even more rings to earn money. Even though the younger generation sometimes refuses, many still choose the coils voluntarily, because without them they feel short-necked, plain, and ashamed. Number 6 plunges us into the world of the ancient Maya, where the most divine faces were deliberately deformed from infancy. Nobles believed that crossed eyes were a sign of favor from the gods, especially the maize god whose eyes were depicted turning inward. Mothers dangled beads or resin bowls between their babies' eyes for months to permanently train the gaze inward. The result was lifelong strabismus, eyes that crossed dramatically, considered the height of beauty and holiness. At the same time, parents strapped boards to the front and back of infants' heads for weeks to flatten the forehead into a sloping, elongated shape that mimicked an ear of corn, the sacred food of life. The more deformed the skull, the closer to godlike. They also filed teeth into sharp points or T-shapes and drilled holes to inlay jade, turquoise, or hematite because a jagged, jeweled smile was elegant. Commoners tried to copy the look but rarely had access to the jade or the time to properly cross their children's eyes. Being born naturally cross-eyed was seen as a divine blessing. Imagine growing up in a world where parents intentionally damaged your vision and skull because perfection meant looking permanently dazed, flat-headed, and slightly monstrous to modern eyes. Number 5 is the enormous lip plates of the Mursi, Surma, and other tribes in Ethiopia's Omo Valley. Around age 15 or 16, a girl's lower lip is sliced open with a knife and a small wooden plug inserted. Over the next year or two, the hole is stretched larger and larger with progressively bigger plugs, until a clay or wooden plate the size of a teacup saucer, sometimes 8 inches across, can be worn. To make room, the bottom 4 front teeth are knocked out with a rock. When the plate is removed, the lip hangs like a floppy, elongated loop of flesh down to the chest. Women flip the plate upward like a lid to eat or speak clearly. The bigger the plate, the more cattle the woman is worth as a bride, sometimes up to 50 or 60 cows for the largest. Girls compete to stretch further because wealth and beauty are measured in how dramatically you can deform your face. The initial piercing and stretching is intensely painful, infections are common, and the lip never returns to normal, yet women say the plate makes them feel powerful and beautiful. Tourists now pay large sums to photograph them, and many use the money to buy even bigger plates. Beauty here is literally measured in pounds of clay and permanent disfigurement. Number 4 brings us to Victorian England and the legal obsession with the 18-inch wasp waist. Corsets were just underwear. They were instruments of torture worn from childhood. Girls were laced tighter every year until the lower ribs folded inward like petals. Organs were displaced upward, livers squashed into weird shapes, stomachs narrowed so much women could only nibble, lungs compressed until breathing was shallow and fainting constant. Tight lacers slept in corsets, bathed in them, and some never removed them. The record waist was 13 inches, achieved by having lower ribs surgically removed, a procedure called rib resection that often killed from infection. Fainting became fashionable, vapors were romantic, smelling salts were carried in every reticule, and special fainting couches were designed so a woman could collapse elegantly without creasing her dress. Doctors published horror stories of punctured lungs and displaced hearts, but fashion magazines responded that true elegance demands sacrifice, and any woman unwilling to tight lace simply wasn't refined. When a woman died young from corset-related illness, society whispered that at least she died with a perfect figure. Number 3 is the heartbreaking reversal that happened in early 20th century China when foot binding was finally outlawed. Overnight, the golden lotus went from ultimate status symbol to national embarrassment. Millions of women who had suffered decades of pain to achieve 3-inch feet now faced ridicule for the very thing that once made them marriageable. Many tried to unbind, forcing the crushed, folded bones back into something resembling natural shape. The pain was worse than the original binding. Bones that had fused wrong were broken again, infections flared, and many women ended up more crippled than before. Some secretly rebound in shame because they couldn't bear having big ugly feet. Suicide rates among older bound foot women spiked. Some hanged themselves rather than live with suddenly shameful bodies. An entire generation had to relearn how to walk on feet that were permanently twisted, all because the definition of beauty flipped in a single decade. Number 2 takes us to the remote islands of Vanuatu and the crocodile scarification ceremonies that turn boys into men. From age 7 or 8, boys are taken to isolated huts for weeks of ritual cutting. Elders use sharpened bamboo blades or shark teeth to slice hundreds of deep incisions into the chest, back, arms, and sometimes face in intricate patterns resembling crocodile scales, the animal believed to be the creator of humanity. No anesthesia. The cuts are rubbed with clay and tree sap to force massive colloid scarring. The more raised and textured the scars, the more handsome and marriageable the man. Smooth skin is considered childish and feminine. The process is repeated over years until the entire upper body is covered in thick, ridged patterns. Men bleed heavily, faint from pain, risk deadly infection, but refusing the cuts means lifelong shame. No wife, no status. Today some villages still practice it because the scars remain the ultimate symbol of masculine beauty, strength, and connection to ancestral spirits. And the absolute weirdest beauty standard in recorded history, number 1, belongs to the Apatani tribe of northeastern India. Until the 1970s, Apatani women were considered the most beautiful in the entire region, so beautiful that neighboring tribes constantly raided to kidnap them as wives. To protect their daughters, Apatani elders came up with a horrifying solution: make the women deliberately ugly to outsiders. Starting around age 10 or 12, girls had both nostrils pierced with sharp sticks in massive circular wooden plugs, sometimes 3 or 4 inches wide, forced them to the holes. At the same time, their faces were tattooed with thick blue lines from forehead to chin. The plugs stretched the nose grotesquely wide, distorted speech, made eating messy, and were intensely painful to insert and wear. The bigger the plugs, the uglier to outsiders and therefore the safer from raiders. Over generations, the practice flipped. Within the tribe, the largest nose plugs and darkest tattoos became the new standard of beauty and status. Women competed to have the biggest possible plugs because it showed family wealth and pride. Some plugs were so enormous the women had to turn their whole heads to look sideways. When raids finally stopped in the mid-20th century, younger women began abandoning the plugs, but many older women kept them until death, saying they felt naked and unattractive without them. The ultimate irony: a beauty standard created to make women ugly that eventually became the tribe's proudest symbol of feminine allure. There you have it, 10 of the most bizarre, painful, and downright horrifying beauty standards humans have ever invented. Every single one made perfect sense to the people living it. They were insane. They were just chasing the same thing we chase today, to look like the version of perfect that their society rewarded. The only thing that changes is what we're willing to suffer for. Makes you wonder what future generations will look back at our filler, implants, rib removals, and extreme contouring and shake their heads exactly the same way. Beauty standards aren't about beauty, they're about belonging, status, and sacrifice. And humans, it turns out, will sacrifice almost anything to feel like they belong.